And I've been doing work for more than a decade on the inner critic. It is the number one thing that women say holds them back from doing what we want to do in our life. We all have this voice in our heads. What is that voice? Where does that come from? What are the stories that we're telling ourselves? And then how are they stopping us living the life that we want to live?
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Life Uncut. I'm Laura.
I'm Brittany.
And I am so excited about today's episode as someone who is very interested in business as a woman, who is interested in seeing other women be very successful in the industries that they work in, and seeing women succeed is something that we care so much about.
Not even that. The thing
Well,
that
yes,
I love.
even that.
No, but on top of that, seeing women, or in today's case, a woman in particular, but seeing women fully support other women is like one of my favorite parts, because we don't see it a lot. And sometimes we see it and we don't believe it. Sometimes we think people are ticking a box by saying, I'm supporting women, but behind the scenes they're not. But today's guest definitely does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've been led to believe that the pie is just not big enough. And so therefore we have to compete with each other rather than working collaboratively. Today we have Dalla-Camina with us. She is a 3-time best-selling author and award-winning women's leadership and gender diversity expert. Say that 10 times fast. Her insights have been featured in Forbes, Marie Claire, CNN, and her popular Psychology Today column with over 2 million readers. She's also the founder and the CEO of the fastest growing women's edtech platform, Women Rising. Now, there is a lot of discussion around women's empowerment in general, but women's leadership in particular is a topic that we are still defining and better understanding. And we have spoken before about gender pay gaps, glass ceilings, sticky floors, opportunity cost, and the expectation on women to do it all. Now, today's chat is for anyone who feels as though they might be a little bit stuck in their jobs or feeling a bit unmotivated to ask and expect more for themselves. Megan has just released a brand new book and it is called Women Rising, unpacking the forces that hold us back, the tools to help us rise up, and the different paradoxes that as women impact us in the workplace and can lead us to or inhibit us from having success. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so excited.
I am so excited to get into this chat. But before we do, we need to know your most embarrassing story.
So I was thinking about this beforehand, and I was thinking, I don't have a salacious, embarrassing story that I could think of.
Well, you literally said, I don't have a Rebel Wilson shitting myself
I
story.
don't have one of those, although my mother would differ, I'm sure, obviously. But I was reflecting, I know you talk a lot about, motherhood and balancing and the juggle, and I certainly talk a lot about that with my audience. And I was thinking about this time when I was a single mum for my son's 23, so for the vast majority of his life. And I remember when he was going into the 5th grade, and sometimes as a mum, you just think you've got all your shit together. You think I'm so organised, I've got it all sorted. And I was driving him, I had a big board meeting, I was still in corporate. I was driving him to my mum's to drop him off. I had them all scheduled to go and get his school uniform and get him all set for school the next day. And we're like, I've got this nailed this year. I'm going to be so
I'm an organised mum who has my shit together.
Exactly.
The aspiring dream.
I'm the aspiring dream. I was driving around the corner to drop him off at my parents', and I see all the kids walking to school in their school uniforms. And we just looked at each other. Luca and I just went, far out. School starts today, not tomorrow. And I'm like, it's 8 a.m. I got a board meeting at 8:30. He's grown out of his school uniform because he'd had a massive growth spurt, and we just both freaked out.
What'd you do? You're just
You're sick today.
You're sick today.
No, I did the perfectionism thing, raced home, scurried around, found his uniform, had him lying on the ground trying to do up his zipper on his pants and get his thing done up, and I got him to school.
Suck
1
in.
minute to go. Suck that in.
It's so funny when kids are running late for school, because usually you assume that it's the child's fault that they're running late, but often when
parents.
we're running late, it's me. It's me. I am the fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you blame your kids.
Yeah.
You don't take the fault. You blame the child. That's really interesting to me. I don't think I knew that part about you, that you said you spent your whole basically adult life as a single mum.
Yeah.
I read that you have so many degrees. I think you're studying now as well, you've got multiple master's degrees. How did you manage to do that? How did you manage to study so much and pay the bills and keep the job and raise a child alone?
Yeah, it was. I look back now to all of those years, and it's no surprise I burnt myself out. But I also look back and I think, how on earth did you survive? How did you do all of that? And I came to learning late. I was a rebel at school. I tried to get kicked out of school. I used to get suspended all of the time because I wanted to go to drama school because I was an actress. So I really discovered this passion for learning later. So I was just trying to do what we do, just trying to do the juggle. And it was really bad.
Yeah.
I had so many moments of mini burnouts before I hit the wall when I was 36, after my first master's degree when I was an executive at IBM. And completely changed my life after that. But I did what so many women do. We just run on the treadmill and hope to God that we don't hit the wall.
We were literally talking about this morning, this idea that you think like, oh, it's going to, after we finish this thing, it's going to slow down. After we finish this thing, I'm going to have more control. But for you, hitting burnout in your 30s was like a very significant and pivotal, it was like the fork in the road for you. What happened at that point in time, and how did suffering burnout change the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, so I had all those mini burnouts, and then I was coming back on a plane from another trip to New York, came back and was just feeling so ill and so overwhelmed and just so over it. And Luca was 6 and school was hell, like that transition from daycare to school and kindy and year 1. And I remember getting off the plane, going home, having a shower, driving into the car park and calling my mum on the phone and saying, I just don't think I can do this for one more day. And I was expecting her to give me the pep talk. Oh, you'll be fine, da-da-da. And she said, of course you can't, Megan. You have no life.
Yeah.
And something just clicked. And I got out of the car, walked into my CEO's office, my boss, said, I'm done. I'm done.
You quit on the spot.
I did, but then I didn't because he
needed you back in.
He was like, well, all the things.
Yeah.
So I negotiated 2 months off, negotiated a new role to come back in, and negotiated to come back as a part-time executive, which had never happened. And I did that for 7 years.
What were those signs of burnout? Like, how did you know that, because when you say you have these mini burnout periods, I think a lot of people can identify, like, I'm run down, then I got better, and it does this cycle.
Yeah.
But how did you know that you'd hit the end of the wall?
One of the signs of burnout is that you just start to care less. Like you get distant from it. When you're stressed or exhausted, you do that. You have a burnout, you get sick, you get more colds, more flus.
Yeah.
But then you recover and you're like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm okay. I'm resilient. Boom, off we go again. But when you really start to see those signs of burnout, whether it's emotional, physical, maternal, whatever it is, you start to withdraw a little bit. Well, for a lot of people, they do that. Plus the signs of I'm exhausted, I can't get up in the morning, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. You lose the passion for what it is. And I was also having some health challenges, thyroid issues, and just other bits and pieces.
It's also hard when you're a single mum, because it doesn't matter how much you don't want to do it. Just you have to. You have to keep going on that treadmill because there's a tiny human there that's still completely depending on you. But I think it's really interesting that it sounds like you had an extremely supportive workplace, because you said, I can't do it anymore, and they adapted to you. Do you see that as frequently as you would like? Because you and your company has done a lot of research into the way women feel at work. Do you find that your situation was a bit of a minority?
Yeah, I think it was an anomaly even to this day.
Wow.
Because, the research we've done at Women Rising, only 1 in 5 women are thriving at work.
1 in 5.
1 in 5. That's a staggering statistic, right?
That's one person in this room right now that is actually thriving in their workplace.
When you say 1 in 5, how do you, what are the parameters for that information? When you do the surveys or however you conduct this research, what is the criteria to be defined as thriving versus not suffering?
So it's self-identified. So we look at, are you languishing? Are you functioning? Which are very typical, sort of research terms that we look at. So that's self-defined. Yeah, I'm thriving. I feel like I'm on top of my game and feeling really good about life. And then there's a whole lot of other questions that we look at in research that gives us different parameters that you kind of look at then together and go, oh, okay, I really see this. I see this trend around women and how high burnout is.
Yeah. In terms of the women who are suffering burnout, obviously 1 in 5, it seems like it's across the board, but did you find that it is something that is more common in mums, in people who are also juggling children, particularly, I guess, young children at the time, or is it kind of just women in general?
Yeah, we thought it would be that. We thought it was going to be really, working mothers who are struggling the most, but we saw it across the board.
Wow.
And we see it in other research as well. So that is interesting, right?
I guess
for all aspects.
Yeah, and that is very interesting because there is absolutely no doubt that mothers take on it's like another full-time job, such an astronomical amount of stress. But I guess the thing is when you are not a mum, you take on other parts of stress, and it's all relative. It's relative to your life. So these people are still experiencing what they're experiencing, but it's comparable in stress levels, but not comparable in the reason of stress. What are some of the other common themes, the feedback from these women in the workplace? Did you go deep enough to know exactly why they say they're not thriving?
Yeah, we see so many different levels. So things like I'm unsupported by my manager. Mm-hmm. I feel like I don't have the opportunities. Like a really high percentage of women said, like, I'm not fulfilling my potential.
Yeah.
And that showed through in how many women said, if my company doesn't start investing in me and in my career, I'm going to leave.
Do they feel like that's a bit of the glass ceiling? Like, is that because there's no opportunity in the company full stop, or because there's no opportunity for women in the company?
I think it's both. This piece around how much support do I get from my manager?
Yeah.
And, does my manager care about me, see me? Are there opportunities for me for my next role? How much bias do I experience in the workplace? We saw 74% of women get interrupted constantly in meetings. They get talked over in meetings, and all of these, we call them microaggressions. They're not really microaggressions, and they compound to really impact women's confidence, which we talk so much about. It's the number one issue that women self-declare they have from fulfilling their career potential at work.
For somebody who is in an environment in their workplace where you say they are experiencing things that are, and I know exactly what you say when you say microaggressions, being interrupted constantly is anything but that, especially when your opinions are being invalidated. How do people rectify this in the workplace? Is it a cultural thing, or are there actually very tangible steps that as individuals we can take to rectify it?
Yeah, the first thing is, from an individual perspective, is to realise that it's not you. And this is such an important step for women to realise, and this is what I write about, the paradoxes of power that impact women. Because what I see, we've had about 10,000 women go through the Women Rising program in the last 4 years. That's a lot of women, right? All ages, all stages, all cultures. And the vast majority of those women come in thinking that it's their problem. They're the problem. If they can't speak up, or if they can't put themselves forward for something, or if they're feeling, imposter syndrome, that it's all on them. So the first thing for women to realise is a lot of these issues are systemic. They stem from the patriarchy. They come from all of the biases that exist in workplaces. And when we realise that, we stop from blaming and shaming ourselves, which further erodes our confidence and sparks up our inner critic inside our heads that tells us all the reasons why we're not good enough. And we start to see the machinations of what's actually going on around us.
Did you get a lot of feedback that women are experiencing this real crux between making the decision on their career and their family, not because their workplace is making them feel that, but because society makes them feel that if they want to go and start family planning, that they're going to lose the jobs, they're going to lose the promotions?
Yeah, this motherhood paradox where we expect women to work like they don't have children, and we expect them to parent like they don't have jobs outside the home. Yeah. And this conversation I have with women in their late 20s and early 30s, and we're having children later, so and all the way on, of what's going to happen to my career. And I can't be successful in my career either because I don't think I can do it, or because of all of the biases, and limitations and the maternal penalty, where we automatically think that women are less capable when they're mothers. Comes through in all of the research.
It's so interesting to me because I feel, as someone who is a mum and has employed mums, it is the complete opposite. No one is as productive as a mother who has to get out to pick up their kids by 4:30. No one. They are not taking lunch breaks. And I'm not saying that is ethos that I want, but they want to get through their work. They want to get it done so that they can get home and be with their kids. They're not on their Instagram and lolling about.
Going for a beer with the boys.
It's such a different focus. And I know even in myself, my propensity for procrastination absolutely went out the window once I had kids, because I became laser focused, because now my time is so much more finite.
100%. But the problem that we see is women know that.
Yeah.
But the people in charge, which we know are 50 and 60-year-old white men, we know that. We know that less than 12% of women are in CEO leadership positions, which is the problem. So the people that are making the decision on whether you can have the promotion and whether you are going to be a great worker are men that don't know. So it comes back, and the reason we're not getting employed in leadership positions is the same thing, because the people employing you are men.
Yes.
I don't know how to break the cycle.
Yeah, well said. Well, this is why I wrote Women Rising, right? Because I wanted to get to a different level of conversation about the problem. Because we keep having the same conversation. And I've been in this conversation for nearly 20 years now on all sides of it. And, like new data came out last week. 2 reports came out. The Lean In McKinsey report in the US, which says that, we're making progress, but it's very fragile progress. And one of the most important stats was only 1 in 10 men see microaggressions against women at work, to your point, right? These are the men who are making the decisions about women's careers, because they're the ones in management and leadership. They don't see it. They don't understand. And then the CEW report in Australia came out that said we're going backwards.
Is that so?
That's, in terms of women in leadership positions, how many CEOs we have.
So it's not even plateauing, it's going backwards.
Yes, at that top level. So we have to get under the skin of, we need targets and we need this and we need that, and what's actually going on for women. And that's things like the motherhood paradox, like the leadership paradox, where women get told, we want you to lead, but don't lead like that. Like, we want you to lead like it's always been done. Lead like a man.
Talk to me a little bit. I mean, you've brought up paradoxes a few times, and I know that this is what your research is centered around. Talk me through what you think are the most important ones, the ones that are the most common that women experience, and how these paradoxes shape the way in which we function within a work environment.
Yeah, great question.
She's like, where do I start?
Yeah. Too big.
Why don't we start at the confidence paradox?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. The confidence paradox is where women get told, be confident, but don't be too confident. Because when women, the world doesn't know what to do with strong, confident women. Let's just be honest, right? We see it everywhere. We see it every day. And in workplaces, a confident woman, someone who is assertive, stands up for herself, uses her voice, goes against the gender norms of what we expect for women. And this is where the paradox comes. So we're going to say to you in your performance review, or whatever conversation you have, you do so much better in your career, you just need to be more confident. Mostly being told that by men who don't understand what that even looks like, how to build it, what the issues are that take away that confidence in the first place. And, this is why I do so much work with women around, what does confidence actually look like and feel like for you? If you're being your most authentic self, what does that look like? What are the things that get in the way of that? One of which is the inner critic, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And what flavour is your inner critic? Is it the perfectionist, the people pleaser, whatever?
Yeah.
And then this is what to do about that.
I think it's also the likability aspect, right? I think a lot of people worry, and maybe worry is not the right word, but there's hesitation in asking for things or being direct for fear of not being liked. And that kind of comes across with this type of meekness, or you get walked all over. You're not actually verbalizing what it is that you want in your work environment or what you need, because you're trying to people please. You're trying to be this agreeable, easy to work with person. And that can be long term, it can be so exhausting.
It is absolutely exhausting. And we're always trying to, where do I fit here?
Yeah.
How do I fit? How do I not ruffle feathers here? Because if I ruffle feathers, I'm going to get cast out. I'm not going to get the job. I'm not going to be in the in-group.
Yeah, but it's a dance, because,
it is a dance.
It's great to be a pioneer in a space, but that doesn't help anyone if by being assertive and being overtly confident ends you up that you're cast out, in your workplace environment. So it really is a dance,
But I think it's important to note here too that men are not just the reason that we don't want to be overly confident. We still live in an environment where a lot of women will equally judge you the second that you come out and show too much confidence. And that is something that I think is inbuilt in us for a very long time. Maybe it's because we know that as a society, women shouldn't be like that. Or maybe we know that there's a scarcity mindset for jobs. So if you're going after something you want, there's an internal bias that's she's doing this the wrong way, or she's flirting with the boss, or she only got that because of this. Do you get feedback about women's perception still just as much as men? Because I don't want to be the person that just goes and dumps on men.
Like I don't think it's men. I think it's the patriarchy, which affects everyone.
Yeah. So
when we say men,
So there's a couple of sides to that, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It is a system of patriarchy that we're having all of these conversations. And also, men aren't the problem. Right. And I completely agree. Well, some men are the problem. Let's be real. But in terms of, like, I never want to be divisive. I never want to be. All of the problems that women have, particularly at work, are because of men.
No,
like men are in the patriarchy, and men in many ways are significantly impacted in negative ways around gender normative behaviour, etc., about the patriarchy.
And there's plenty of great supportive men too.
There's plenty of great supportive men and male allies, and we do a lot of work with them. So it's an and. And to your question, yes, we hear all of the time from women in our community, and it comes through in the research, where we have a woman who is causing the problem, a female leader who's not supporting other women, who's a toxic leader, call them a patriarchal leader. Absolutely. And like we can explain all of that away. The scarcity mindset, there used to be one position for a woman, so everyone's fighting for it. The way that we tell women they have to lead in a very masculine mode to be successful. Like there are reasons for all of it. The thing that I find with women, like when a man interrupts you in a meeting, it's almost expected. When a woman doesn't support you, like it feels like a betrayal. Like there's a very tribal kind of, do you know what I mean? Like essence to, well, why aren't you supporting me? Like we're in this together.
Yeah.
And it just cuts differently.
We've touched on a couple of the paradoxes. How many are there that you have identified? And I know we said sort of like, what are the main ones? We've covered motherhood, we've covered confidence, we've covered leadership. How many are there? And what do you think are the number one most important?
Yeah. So there's 6. Tried to keep it kind of net.
Yeah. It's probably more, but yeah.
That for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like you could literally go on endlessly. So the empowerment paradox, we expect women to be empowered in systems that disempower them. And this is the piece where we talk about women's progress, but we don't talk about the systemic issues in that progress. And then we're always talking about fixing the women.
Yeah.
Well, if you're more confident, then you'll be successful. Well, maybe, but if we want all women to rise, we have to fix the systemic issues. So and really understanding what they are. For the empowerment paradox, the leadership paradox, the success paradox. So be successful, but in a sea of expectations. Well, everyone has a view on what a successful woman looks like and how you should be successful. And if you do it this way, someone has something to say about it. If you do it this way, something has to say about it. It can be very challenging for women to then know, well, what do I want for myself? How do I define success? And not only that, but how do I then own that and have courage and confidence to go and, take the path? Like when I left my corporate career, I was in a high-profile job, all the trappings of what that is, to leave and start my own small business. Like everyone's like, you're mad. Crazy.
Yeah. It's like you're throwing it
for
away.
doing that. You're throwing your 20 years, of your work. You're a single mum. You're this, da, da, da. That's what success looks like. And I was like, well, no, it's not.
I think the same.
Not for you.
Not for me at this point in my life. Yeah.
I think the same thing, not just in the workplace. I think that this is something that we are questioning more in terms of motherhood. I think we've been told that, well, you just hit a certain age and you have children, and that's just kind of what most people's adult female life looks like. And now there's this rising conversation around childless by choice, because before it used to be, well, if you were childless, it wasn't by choice. It was because you couldn't have kids. And now we have this generation of women who are saying, actually, like, kids are great for other people, but they're just not for me. And the thing about that's so interesting is the instant thought that choosing that life must be selfish, that they must be inherently selfish people if they don't want to dedicate this massive part of themselves to children.
Yes.
But then I think on the flip side, I know a lot of mums who love their children and love being mums, but would choose differently. And that's they would never say it out loud.
If they could go back.
You'd be completely vilified, right?
But they have verbalized it to me.
Yes.
And that is such an interesting thing to kind of go, okay, but why? Why did you feel that you needed to make this decision?
It's also, I don't know if this is any relation, but when you see a man, like when you see a couple break up, it's almost not even a question who takes the kids, right? The man can go and move overseas if he wants and see his kids twice a year and no one blinks an eye. But if a mum ever took that route in a breakup and said, I'll take the kids 2 holidays a year.
On the
I'm going
weekends.
to move to the Amalfi
Yes.
Coast. You have them. The shock,
Yes.
the outrage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're pushing against gender norms.
Yeah.
We're pushing against, and it impacts us as women in every single aspect of our lives. It's the same with women who choose to be single.
Yeah.
It's like the stigma, or that it's not so much now. And I read a statistic yesterday that, and I think it was like in 10 years, 45% of women will be single.
That's so interesting. And I'm not
And I was like,
surprised.
I'm not surprised. Well, I'm single. I'm not surprised either.
I had such an interesting conversation about this recently with my mother-in-law. So my mother-in-law lives with me, Matt's mum. She is 72 and she has been single for, I don't know, the better part of almost 20 years, I guess, 15 years. Often the question has come up like, oh God, wouldn't you just like want to be, don't you ever want the companionship? Don't you ever want, the company?
The love.
And she's always very devoutly said, I have amazing girlfriends. I love being a grandma and I don't need a male companionship. But recently when we were speaking, she said, I know that I don't choose men who are good to me. She's like, so why would I want to be in a relationship with someone when my track record has just been horrible relationships? She's like, I had an epiphany one day and I was like, I'm so happy being on my own and not handing my happiness over to anyone else. So many people find it hard to understand, but she's like, I've never been more me and more comfortable in who I am than when I stopped dating and stopped seeking that validation
I'm
elsewhere.
the same, right?
Yeah.
I've been single for a decade by choice, and never been happier. And this thought that like women have always been defined by who is the man standing next to them.
Yeah.
And it's not that anymore. And I think it's such a testament to how much power women have and have access to now.
And I think like more we're realizing that people are choosing not to have kids, choosing not to be in relationships.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they are not dateable. It means they've made the choice.
Yeah.
You know?
And it used to be, right?
Yeah.
Like it used to be, oh my God, I'm a spinster.
Yeah.
Nobody wants me. What does that mean about me and my womanhood? Like it's not that anymore. And even if it is that anymore, like I sure as shit don't care.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's so true.
If people think that.
You've spoken as well. I mean, we've got the paradoxes, but you also speak as well about these 13 different types of like almost like personality types. You get the perfectionist, the beauty queen, the imposter. Why was it so important to break down people's personality traits in this way?
Yeah, so this is the second part of the book where I look at the archetypes of the inner critic. And I've been doing work myself and with women for more than a decade on the inner critic. It is the number one thing that women say holds them back from doing what we want to do in our lives and having clarity and taking action.
I might rattle them off really quickly,
go for it.
just so people know what we're talking about. The perfectionist, the beauty queen, the skeptic, the imposter, the people pleaser, the outsider, the comparer, the good girl, the overachiever, the self-doubter, the chameleon, the empath, the ideal mother.
Which one do you think you are, Britt?
Okay, I don't know what this says about me. I was looking at this list over and over last night trying to pick what I think I am, and I genuinely don't know. I don't know what I am. I would love to know what you think I am, Laura, someone that works with me all the time. I'm definitely an empath. I don't know. I would say you're a perfectionist, Laura.
Depends on what it is. I mean, it depends on what part of my life. I think there's
And an overachiever, probably.
Yeah, I would say I think I'm an overachiever. I think I try and fill my version of success is built around saying yes to almost everything, to the point where like I will reach burnout, but I'm like, I find it very hard to say no to things. And usually it's things that I want to do and it's things that are big opportunity, but like I have to do them in the best way possible with the most thorough attention to detail.
So that's the overachiever and the perfectionist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably just say I'm an overachiever too in a way, because success for me at the moment would be, and I think it's wrong, and I grapple with that, but success for me is very career driven at the moment.
It's not wrong.
Well, no, I shouldn't say wrong, but
It's where you put your self-value.
It's a really big focus for me, instead of like probably my relationship or love, which is also very important. But for me, I've always been very driven and very career oriented. But what do you see is probably the most, like, is there a really strong standout that you see from people from this inner critic list?
Yeah, there's a couple. So the imposter is a huge one, where like I always feel like I'm going to get found out. Like I feel like I'm a fraud. Someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, why are you podcasting? You're not a podcaster.
Yeah.
Right? And that sense of like I never feel like I'm in the right place and that I belong to be here. So the imposter is a huge one for women, particularly at work.
I think the imposter one is an interesting one because it also is a driver for the overachiever and the perfectionist. And I think that for me is probably something that in every aspect, because I work so hard because I'm like, well, if I don't think I belong here, I'll prove to you that I belong here.
Yes.
And that's where it comes from.
There's a lot of comfort, though, I think, in imposter syndrome, in knowing that some of the most successful men in the world, almost every one of the most successful men in the world, have come out and said that they still to this day suffer imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean,
which I think is
interesting.
fascinating.
I feel like probably not as much as women, but
No, it is.
Well,
It's proven.
that's what the science says. The science says.
But it's the idea of people that are successful feel that, and that's why they're successful, because they're constantly having to prove themselves, so they get to that extremely high level.
Yeah. So let's talk about the overachiever, because that's me. And we all can have different archetypes. Like, we're not just one, and they can change and shift. But yeah, when I wrote the overachiever, I go into the flow state, and I was writing, and I came back and I read it and went, oh, that's me. I'm the overachiever, and it's that drive, strive, energy. And a lot of times it can come from a really good place. Like for me, it comes from purpose, like a sense of purpose and service and wanting to make a difference. But it is also absolutely a precursor to burnout if you don't know how to manage it. The people pleaser is a huge one for women.
Yeah.
Because we're socialized and cultivated to be kind and caring and nurturing and take care of people. And what we were talking about before of not wanting to ruffle the feathers, like
Totally.
where do I fit? Be likable. So that's a big one, the perfectionist. And the ideal mother, this, how do I fit into this good mother persona, and how does that conflict with like my aspirations and my dreams for myself, and how do those two things come together?
Yeah, I think every mum probably grapples with that at some point. What do you mean by the beauty queen?
So the beauty queen, I really grappled with calling it that, but it is when we have a really loud inner critic that is telling us that we're not pretty enough, you're not beautiful enough, you don't fit in, you're getting old, you've got a grey hair, that we don't meet societal standards for what a woman should look like.
Or that there is so much value placed within the way you look.
And so much validation that comes. And, particularly with social media.
Yeah.
And how we are continually checking, comparing. And when all of our self-worth is placed on how we look versus who we are.
Yeah, so interesting.
One of the ones on the list that I would have imagined would be very popular is the comparer, because we do live in a comparison culture.
Yes.
Not just because of social media. So social media heightens it for sure. But I think we're always comparing someone else our age. What are they doing? Well, why haven't I got that yet?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't I doing that yet? Or should I be doing more if they've got 4 jobs, if they're doing a business?
Yes.
Do you think that these archetypes are all negative personality traits, or do you think that there is ways in which these can be implemented in a positive way, or people have them in a positive way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I write about the light side and the shadow side. So, when it comes to our inner critic, we all have one. Like, we all have this voice in our heads. The archetypes are really helpful because it helps us understand, well, what is that voice? Where does that come from? What's the broader context of that? Like, why? Why are so many women people pleasers? What are the good aspects of that? So if you're a perfectionist, the light side of the perfectionist is, well, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to refine and I'm going to, be really diligent about my work. The shadow side is it's never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
And by default, I'm never going to feel like I'm good enough. And then there's ways that we manage and tame that through the actions that we can take. So it's not all bad. One of the key things is that we need to be aware of what are the stories that we're telling ourselves that are impacting how we feel about ourselves, the meaning that we make from that, and then how are they stopping us living the life that we want to live?
And how do people, so if you're going to identify these things in yourself, are there different strategies for each one, or are there similar strategies to implement once you've acknowledged and can figure out what person and I guess personality traits you have and how that's impacting the way you show up in work?
Yeah. So there are some consistent strategies. Like the top strategy that I teach around inner critic is 3 steps. It's super simple, deceptively simple, but absolutely life-changing. So the first step is catch the story. Like when you want to go and do something and you don't do it, what's the story that you're telling yourself? I'm not smart enough to speak up. I'm experiencing this in my PhD program at the moment, because I had my first class and I'm doing it in the US. So it's all, Zoom, small classes. And I'm on my first class. It's 3 a.m. because I do my classes from 3 till 6 a.m.
Because you're an overachiever.
So much fun. Well, I have to because that's when it's on. And I'm sitting in my first class watching all of these scholars, contribute and analyze the readings and all this. And I'm just sitting there going,
I have something to contribute.
holy shit. Like, I'm not smart enough to be here.
I can't be here.
Wow.
Right? And I've got 2 master's degrees and 30 years of experience. And but because I've done this work for so long, I could recognize, oh, okay, that's the story. The second step is that true? Like, is that true that, I don't deserve to be here? I'm not smart enough to be here. Well, I could demystify that quite quickly. And then the third step is get to the action. Well, what was the action? I need to contribute and speak.
Yeah.
And I can now do that very quickly. When I started, and what I see for so many of the women that I work with is that can really take some time to even number one, what are the stories that I'm telling myself or about the situation? Getting to that through line, is that true? What's actually going on here, so that we can get to the reframe and take the action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me, something that's been brought up a couple of times. And it's like in terms of how specifically women and women who are leaders, but they're told to lead in the same way that men lead. How do you think women should be leading? Like, what are the parameters that are different to how men are doing it? And why are we kind of denying ourselves the opportunity to be like the most authentic version of ourselves as a leader when we're doing it in an alternate way?
So, that's the whole crux of what we do at Women Rising. You articulated that so beautifully. So there's the two sides of it, right? There's the patriarchal constructs that we work and live in that tells women, we want you to lead, but not like that. Lead like a man, lead in a masculine way, lead in a directive, authoritative way, because that's what leadership has always looked like. And still today, it still looks like that in a lot of places. The work that I'm trying to get to is a modern definition of leadership that can be relevant for all genders, but particularly for women. Like, what does authentic leadership look like? What are your strengths? What are your values? What are the traits? I talk a lot about feminine and masculine traits, which are non-gendered. They apply to all genders. But for women, for decades and decades, all of those feminine traits, intuition, vulnerability, empathy, vision for the future, they're research-defined feminine traits. There's been no place for them. The work that I'm really interested in doing and focused on is, number one, how do we define a new model of leadership? And we're seeing a lot of that. We saw that with Jacinda Ardern when she was Prime Minister, where she said, I refuse. She got so much criticism that she was too soft. And
she was
said,
exactly the person I was thinking of. I was like, here is a new mum who is the Prime Minister, who is crying, who is hugging people, who is showing a level
empathy.
of, a level of vulnerability that you've never seen or we've never seen before, but it allows people to connect with her.
Yes. But she got so criticised.
Yeah.
And was told, you need to, toughen up, be more directive, be less emotional. And she said very clearly, I refuse to accept that I can't be, paraphrasing, both soft and strong. I refuse to accept that. That's a new model of leadership. And that's what I'm teaching, looking at where are your feminine traits? Where are your inherent strengths and values? And how do you bring them to the fore versus twisting yourself into a pretzel to fit a model of leadership that doesn't fit you, will never fit you, and I believe is a cause for so many women opting out of workplaces, sidelining themselves, because what I hear from women all the time is, I can be authentic here, like at this level, whether that's mid-management, coming into mid-management, but I look above me in my workplace and all I get told is, if you want a more senior role, you need to change.
Be more assertive.
Yeah, and women are but then when they're assertive, they get told they're aggressive, right? It's this likability penalty. So many women are saying, no, thank you.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why our numbers aren't shifting.
I really love the way in which you've described this, because I do think that people, for very understandable reasons, like feminine, female, masculine, male, but understanding that there's characteristics and traits that have been gendered but aren't necessarily about gender.
Yes.
And I think that that's so important because, you know, men can be vulnerable. We talk about toxic masculinity. Men can have all of the same emotions in a leadership position, but they've been conditioned to not. Like, we've been conditioned in a way that we've really kind of gendered these very, very like normal emotional responses to things.
Yes.
I feel like we saw it a lot with Barack Obama. Like, I feel like we saw a different level of leadership with him for a man.
Yes.
More empathy. He came across as a lot more soft than someone like Donald Trump. Don't even need to compare the two. You wrote a book, Getting Real About Having It All, and the $1 million question. Do you think we can have it all?
You can have burnout too.
Yeah, you can
Have it with your side of burnout.
Yeah. We'll throw everything in there.
Everything in there. So funny looking back at that book. I wrote that book 12 years ago. I was still in my corporate career. I want women to ask a different question. I want women to ask themselves, what is it that I want? Like, I'm so sick of this, which is why I wrote that book, you know? Like, men never get asked this question. Can you have it all? Like, it's a patriarchal question for women that constantly makes us battle with ourselves and battle with each other and judge and compare and feel like we're never good enough. So, like, I'm really interested in the question of, like, what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
What is it that you want in your life? How do you define success for the season that you're in right now, not what you thought it should have been 10 years ago? And how can you go create that for yourself and stay true to your journey?
The thing about this question of can you have it all, what it really is asking is, can you do it all? It's the expectation. I think this really comes into play with motherhood because, you know, when we say, can you have it all? It's the juggling the career and juggling the motherhood. And that piece really just means, well, can you juggle a full-time career and also be the majority caregiver in your household? That's what that question is. It's not a question about, can you 50-50 parent with your husband? It's, can you do most of it? And I think for the people who have the households where they do 50-50 parent, you realize that it is actually very achievable to have a career and to be a 50% parent because you have the support and the network and the framework around you. It's a question that whenever I am interviewed on other podcasts, it's like, how do you do so many things? And I'm like, I do. And I know that I probably have a higher sort of like overachieving drive, but I have so much help. And my husband isn't a hands-on dad. He's just a dad that does 50% of the dadding in our household. And it means that he has a full-time career and I have a full-time career and we both do full-time parenting between us.
But I don't think the idea of having it all also has to just be in the box of motherhood and work. There's a lot of people that don't want kids that still want to feel like they can have it all. And for that looks like the really high income with the big house and the white picket fence, but also the great relationship. But they want a work-life balance. They don't want to work that much, but they also want to be able to travel. Like, it's just an idea of whatever your all is. But I read something really interesting just yesterday that was this conversation around let's normalize being happy with a 9-to-5. Like, we're really comparing ourselves to everyone. Like, we are led to believe growing up now that you have to have a side hustle and multiple streams of income and you have to overconsume everything because that's what we're seeing success is online.
Yes.
I was listening to it and I was being like, that's so true. Some people's success is having a life outside of work. Like, some people want to just go to work on a 9-to-5. They
Not
don't
take
want
home
their
the stress.
They don't want their side hustle.
Enjoy their life.
They want their family life on the weekends. Like, I think back to my parents. You know, I'm 37, but there were 4 kids. But I think about my childhood growing up. My parents worked very, very hard because they had to. But the balance, I don't remember them working at night. They were always with us on the weekends. They just went and did their 9-to-5s, and then we had a real family life. And I don't think we see that as much anymore.
Yeah. And I think we really have to give ourselves permission to define it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's hard in the world that we currently live in, where there is so much evidence of what our life should look like, that it is hard to detach from that and also to unravel all of those expectations that women, you know, get put upon to do that inner work, which is hard for a lot of women to sit there and go, yeah, what do I want for myself?
What is success?
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? And I know that like a lot of this comes back to this conversation around purpose, like what is my purpose? And I think it takes some people a really long time to figure out what it is, not that is just their purpose, but what is purposeful to them? Like what do they do in life that makes them feel fulfilled and happy? And I'm sure it is a combination of many things that add to that. In terms of this statistic we talked about at the very start, that only 1 out of 5 women are thriving in the workplace. What can people do if they've identified that in themselves? What are the first steps to being able to live in a way and work in an environment that makes them feel like they have purpose and also makes them feel like they're on a better path towards thriving?
So the very first one, and 95% of women who come and do the work with us don't know the answer to this question, but it is, what is it that I want for my life? What is my life vision? What are the elements? Do I want, family life, spiritual life, creative life? Where does my career fit into that? Where's my well-being? Like, what does my picture look like? That's always the first question. Because so often we feel stuck in our careers, but we feel stuck in our careers, we don't know where they fit. And we don't actually know the second question, which is, where do I find meaning and purpose in my work? And in my work and also in my life, right? Like, you can have a 9-to-5 job and your job is not your purpose. Your purpose is what you do in the evenings or the weekends, or playing in a band, or taking care of your kids, or looking after your aging parents. Like, that's where you find purpose. And so often we think that, well, I have to know my why, and my why has to be where I make my money.
Yeah.
That's just not true.
Do you think you have to have a purpose to thrive?
I think you have to be connected to meaning. And like, we see that in the data. I think we all feel that. Like, if you don't feel like you have meaning and connection,
What's the point?
What's the point? And that's can obviously cause a whole lot of mental health issues, emotional health issues. And I believe we all have a purpose. Like, I believe, or multiple purposes of why we're here. Like, what is your role to do in this life?
I also think purpose can be fluid as well. Like, it's going to change multiple times over your life.
Definitely.
Absolutely. It has to be
Definitely,
though, right?
yeah.
I mean, even if you, as you said, like, what if your purpose is taking care of your elderly parents, and then your elderly parents aren't here anymore?
Yes.
Like, that is a very real thing, that it has to be something that is fluid. And I think it's also, when you are in a place where you don't feel like you have it anymore, it's putting in the work to figure out, okay, well, what is it that I can focus on, and how can I make myself get back to a place where I have something that is fulfilling in my life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when my fiance doesn't play football anymore and his purpose becomes me.
Good luck.
Joking.
Good luck with that.
Megan, thank you so much for coming in today. It's such a fascinating chat, and unfortunately, a chat that is so important because it's so prevalent still. The patriarchy that we're still fighting daily in the workplace and as women it's unfortunate that it's 2024 and we still have to have these conversations, and you still have to do your studies, and you're still writing these books on it. But it's fascinating, and I have no doubt we'll be speaking to you again. We will be putting Megan's links to the website and to her new book, Women Rising, in our show notes. So if you want to go and find out more, please go, because you are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on, and thank you for all the work you do to support women.
Oh, stop it. Thank you.
I won't.